Welcome to Dr. Balaga's God Knowledge Doc podcast, your quick dive into the latest medical breakthroughs to keep you ahead of the curve. Let's get started. Today is September 29, 2025. This video is on several articles on influenza vaccination. Two original articles in the New England Journal of Medicine, one in JAMA with an accompanying editorial, and one in the Lancet. High-dose influenza vaccine, the Spanish study. Seasonal influenza causes 3 to 5 million hospitalizations and 290,000 to 650,000 deaths annually worldwide. The risk is highest in adults above the age of 65. High-dose vaccine has 4 times hemagglutinin antigen, 60 micrograms per strain, versus a standard dose of 15 micrograms per strain. Prior randomized controlled trials have shown about 24% greater efficacy for higher dose versus standard against lab-confirmed influenza in older adults. The GALFLU trial is a pragmatic registry-based, open-label randomized controlled trial in Galicia, Spain, conducted between 2023 to 2025. Study cohort comprised of 133,882 participants, mean age 72.3 plus or minus 4.3, 53.6% were male, and 25% had greater than one chronic disease. Follow-up 14 days post-vaccination through May 31st. Powered for hospitalizations. Statistics, intention to treat, relative vaccine effectiveness, and hierarchical testing sequence was utilized. What did they find? The primary endpoint, hospitalization due to influenza or pneumonia, 0.26% with a high dose versus 0.34% with a standard dose. Relative effectiveness, 23.7%. Influenza-specific hospitalizations, 0.09% versus 0.14%. Relative effectiveness, 31.8%. Pneumonia hospitalization, 0.17% versus 0.21%. Relative effectiveness, 15.7%. Cardiorespiratory hospitalizations, 1.47% versus 1.60%. Relative effectiveness was 8.4%. All-cause mortality, 0.45% versus 0.52%. Relative effectiveness was 12.8%. Limitations, fewer events than expected. Open-label design. No systematic influenza testing. Single region study. The key takeaway from the Spanish study was high-dose vaccination reduced hospitalizations for influenza, pneumonia, and influenza alone. Safety similar to standard dose. Findings consistent with prior evidence. The next study was high-dose influenza vaccine in older adults, conducted in Denmark. Higher dose vaccine contains 4 times hemagglutinin versus standard dose. Previous randomized controlled trials have shown 24% higher efficacy against lab-confirmed influenza. GALFLU was a pragmatic, open-label, randomized controlled trial in Denmark across 3 influenza seasons, 2022 to 2025. The study cohort comprised of 332,438 individuals randomized above the age of 65, mean age 73.7, 48.6% were women, 53.5% had more than one chronic disease. Follow-up 14 days post-vaccination to May 31st. Data from National Health Registries, powered for hospitalization outcomes. What did they find? The primary outcome for influenza pneumonia was 0.68% with the high dose versus 0.73% with the standard dose. Relative effectiveness, 5.9%. Influenza hospitalizations, 0.06% versus 0.11%, relative effectiveness 43.6%, pneumonia hospitalizations 0.63% in both groups, no difference. Cardiorespiratory hospitalizations 2.25% versus 2.38%, 5.7% relative effectiveness. Limitations of the study: open label registry based endpoints, variability in influenza seasons, coding and practice changes post COVID. The key takeaway: no significant reduction in primary endpoint, but evidence of benefit versus influenza specific and cardiorespiratory outcomes. The safety was comparable in both groups. And this was published in the New England Journal. The next study was the GALFLU, published in JAMA. It was a pragmatic open label individually randomized clinical trial conducted in Denmark 2022 to 2025. The participants were 332,438 individuals above the age of 65. 27.4% had cardiovascular disease at baseline. Follow-up was 14 days post-vaccination through May 31st, each influenza season. Statistics: intention to treat, relative vaccine effectiveness 1 minus RR into 100. Subgroup and sensitivity analysis were conducted. What did they find? The primary endpoint, hospitalization for influenza and pneumonia, was neutral. Cardiovascular hospitalizations 1.3% versus 1.4%. RVE was 7.2%. Heart failure hospitalizations, high dose 0.13% versus 0.16%. Cardiorespiratory hospitalizations 2.25% versus 2.38%. The relative effectiveness for heart failure hospitalizations was 19.5% with high dose, and for cardiorespiratory hospitalizations overall was 5.7%. Limitations: neutral primary outcome, secondary endpoints exploratory, open label registry based, potential misclassification basis. Key takeaways: high dose influenza vaccine reduced cardiovascular and heart failure hospitalizations versus standard dose in older adults. These findings are hypothesis generating but suggest benefit during peak influenza activity. There's an accompanying editorial in JAMA by Dr. Robert Califf from Duke and a previous FDA commissioner. In his editorial, he said GALFLU showed no significant difference in primary endpoint, that's influenza and pneumonia hospitalizations, between high and standard doses, but small cardiovascular benefits emerged. Interpretation: secondary outcomes are hypothesis generating, highlights debate around p-value in statistical reporting. The key point: the estimated benefit is small, about 762 people vaccinated with high dose to prevent one cardiorespiratory admission, but may translate, he says, into large public health gains at a population scale. Broader view: trial methods, pragmatic design, registry linkage, and digital consent demonstrates a model for low cost, high power evidence generation. Key takeaway: more critical than the findings is the need for a true learning health system to rapidly produce robust real-world evidence for vaccines and other interventions. The next trial is the PANDA II influenza vaccine trial published in the Lancet. In China, influenza vaccine coverage among heart failure patients is less than 1% despite guideline recommendations. The PANDA II was a pragmatic, multi-regional, cluster randomized controlled trial across 164 hospitals in 12 provinces. 7,771 patients, mean age 71.9 years, 47.2% were women, 97% were Han ethnicity, NYHA class 3, 54%, and class 4, 45.9%. Follow-up 12 months post-discharge with assessments at 1, 3, 6, and 12 months. Statistics: modified intention to treat analysis, hierarchical logistic regression with random effects, adjust for age, gender, left ventricular ejection fraction, kidney function, and NYHA class. What did they find? The primary outcome, death or readmission at 12 months, was 41.2% in the vaccinated group, was 47% in the usual care group, odds ratio 0.83, p-value 0.019, all-cause mortality 10% versus 12.8%, odds ratio 0.76, p-value 0.0001, readmission 35.4% versus 40.5%, odds ratio 0.83, p-value 0.037, not significant after correction. Limitations: open label design, hospital withdrawal, low generalizability beyond semi-urban China, influenced by variable influenza COVID activity. Key takeaways: in-hospital influenza vaccine before discharge reduces mortality and readmission in acute heart failure patients. Safe, feasible, and scalable for low resource settings. So what do we learn from these three large trials? The three large pragmatic influenza vaccine trials informed global practice. The DANIFLU was conducted in Denmark, 332,000 individuals. Neutral primary endpoint but signal for reduced cardiovascular and heart failure hospitalizations. GALFLU in Spain, 134,000. Significant reduction in influenza and pneumonia hospitalizations. Consistent benefit for influenza's specific outcomes. And the PANDA II, 7.8 thousand individuals, heart failure patients. In-hospital vaccination cut mortality 10% versus 12.8% and reduced readmission. Scalable in low coverage settings. Overall takeaway: high-dose influenza vaccines offer incremental benefit. Implementation strategies: registry-based randomized controlled trials, bedside vaccination demonstrate feasibility of improving outcomes at scale. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your colleagues. When we change how we see disease, we change how we shape lives. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep seeking wisdom. Podcast brought to you by Master MedFacts at mastermedfacts.com.